Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, tons more War of the Spark coming out this week.
True. And a lot worth kind of a deeper dive and investigation, because they wasted no time doing two things. One, just dropping a bazillion spoilers. I mean, we're at like, God, it's, this is like what, the second full, like a little over 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and 165 of the cards are spoiled already.
No, my friend, 166 at last count.
Jeez, OP. So yeah, it's out of control. And then also, I don't know what their deal is, but like this set seems to have embraced a little bit of power creep, and that's fine. Whatever, I guess. I don't know. They're balancing around different things. Like, what's up with Primordial Worm, man? Just 7/6 vanilla at common.
I mean, I don't know. Is that crazy? I don't know about the limited.
Who knows? That's big though. That is big. But as dope as that card is, as defining of a card as that is, I wanted to see what you thought of just the sheer number of sweepers in the set. So, like, we talked about widespread brutality a little bit last week. There's more of them. There's a few. So there's Time Wipe, which is 2 white, blue. Return a creature you control to its owner's hand, then destroy all creatures.
I feel like that card is often just going to be destroy all creatures, right? But it has a little. It creates.
It doesn't target.
Incentive.
Remember, it's important to know it doesn't target, so you can play it when you have no creatures.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, I think like that card is just often just going to be destroy all creatures, but it does create a different incentive. So, previously, a lot of the decks that might be relying on a blue-white sweeper might have no creatures in their deck. They might only have some Teferis, right? So this is like, hey, if you wanna deign to play an Angel or a Niv Mizzet or something, we got your back. It's kind of saying that.
I think you might be underestimating this card. How about this? I choose Augur of Bolas.
That seems to imply that the Augur of Bolas might come back down and get your next Time Wipe to me.
Right, like Augur of Bolas it's like Snapcaster Mage Cryptic Command, right? Like, if you can use normally your Wrath is like this dead card, but if you can like use your Wrath to draw another card off your Augur of Bolas, you're kind of doing a little something.
Oh, you know what? You're right. Like, actually, maybe there's matchups where the Time Wipe would just be dead otherwise, and like
right.
5 casting cost Boomerang myself isn't the worst.
Well, it's a thing, and it's not like the opportunity cost is high. What were you doing? I mean, you give up, the Shatterstorm option of the other 5-cost White Sweeper? It's not like this one's super hard to cast like Kaya's Wrath, Yeah,
I think this is probably going to be like a medium popular card, but the problem with it, I think, is that it's got some very direct competition, and it's 5, and a lot of the direct competition is 4 or even 3, right?
Well, not if you're playing Jeskai. Right, like if you're playing a Jeskai deck, where you could potentially even like bounce your own Crackling Drake too, right? It's not like Augur of Bolas is the only possible option.
So I wasn't sure about
those
that.
decks play those decks play 5-cost sweepers once in a while. Not all the time, but they do sometimes.
So Jeskai in particular is a place that I was thinking about for sweepers, right? So because there's Solar Blaze now, so Solar Blaze is like the direct competitor to Kaya's Wrath. And I think it's way, way worse. Don't get me wrong. For purposes of sweeping all creatures at 4, it's way, way worse. But I still think it's probably generally pretty good.
I don't like Solar Blaze as much I don't like Solar Blaze as much in decks with Deafening Clarion. Because, you're already getting the damage to yourself stuff from Deafening Clarion. Solar Blaze has a weakness to high toughness things and to fatties. Deafening Clarion already has those weaknesses.
Well, I mean, not that I'm taking away your Deafening Clarion argument, right? Like, because Aurelia, for example, is friends with Solar Blaze, but Aurelia is really friends with Deafening Clarion, right?
And I think that you can play Solar Blaze and Deafening Clarion side by side if you're actually playing a heavy creature deck. That's where you would actually be more interested in Solar Blaze, I think. Other than I think you can also just play Solar Blaze in decks that don't have a lot of white mana.
Well,
if your Jeskai deck might easily be in a spot where it doesn't want to try to support double white.
But the other argument is like, what deck is that, right? Is it like a blue-red deck, like a Drake's deck that's splashing white? Like we saw,
it's a Nif Mizzet deck with Teferi.
I was actually thinking, and this might be completely like way off because I think Solar Blaze might be bad enough that this is way off that it just might be just a regular Jeskai control comeback where Esper rose in popularity largely because Chaos Wrath is a new tool that came into the format and a powerful tool. And this is just like the direct competitor and just be like, all right, back to Jeskai. And we even saw in the Grand Prix not that long ago that, people were into Jeskai. There was a Jeskai in the top 8, but not an Esper.
I just think this is unreliable enough that it's a lot closer of an analog to Ritual of Soot than it is to Chaos Wrath.
Oh man, you are really down on Solar Blaze. Like
it's like Ritual of Soot.
Yeah, but playable. Ritual of Soot stinks.
No, it's playable.
I agree, it's playable. I think that Solar Blaze is equally playable. This is just like the most damning with faint praise ever. Like I think Solar Blaze is substantially better than Ritual of Soot. And for the purposes of what you want to forecast and cost sorcery and control colors for, it's worse than Chaos Wrath, but it's colossally easier to cast. Like, way easier to cast.
I mean, it is way easier to cast, so is Ritual of Soot in some decks. I just mean that I don't think it's very good. Right. Chaos Wrath is like a defining card. This card is merely fine.
All right, well, there are a lot of good card advantage generating ways to kill creatures at the 4 in this set. I think
Dear Lord, there's a bizarre number.
I have never seen a set like this. I was really thinking to myself today, I'm like, what if I made a 2-for-1 deck that had a ton of different ways to kill things that cost 4? Right? Well, I mean, all of them are pretty good. That's the thing that's weird about it, right? You can't play too many, but they're pretty good.
So if you're playing blue-red and possibly, I don't know, green, Rahls Outburst is a interesting one that kind of warrants a second look. So Rahls Outburst is 2 blue-red, deal 3 damage to any target. Look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one in your hand and the other in your graveyard. So in some ways, this sort of evokes a prophetic bolt. From another perspective, though, it's actually kind of like Chemister's Insight. You see, Chemister's Insight is a 4-cost inspiration where you have the option to later turn one card in your hand into another inspiration, right?
Yeah.
Rattles Outburst has the instead of you getting to wait until later, you get to do it. You have to do it now, and instead of any card in your hand, it has to be one of these 2 cards. But on the flip side is that you don't have to pay the 4 mana to turn your card into a lightning bolt. So I think it's kind of interesting, right?
Well, I was thinking way more direct applications of this. I was just looks like I'm binning a Phoenix with this, or it looks like I'm discarding a Chemister's Insight or some other jumpstart cards. I just thought this card has the functionality built in order to do the thing that we often were inciting for, right? I mean, you guess you have to be pretty lucky for that, right? It has to be in the top 2 cards that you do that versus you can discard anything.
Yeah. Now, you do have some competition, though, because it's like Rahls Outburst is also at the same spot in the curve as Crackling Drake, for instance. And the fact that there are there's more 4-cost options that you can plausibly play. It kind of makes Rahls Outburst look more attractive to me in some sort of a deck that's specifically trying to avoid having a bunch of creatures. And in particular, I look at some kind of either a Wilderness Reclamation deck, which, by the way, Wilderness Reclamation, man. So you can play Wilderness Reclamation Nexus of Fate with this new Rahls Storm Conduit. And so Rahls Storm Conduit is the 2 blue-red 4 loyalty. When you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, Rahl deals 1 to target opponent or planeswalker. Then he has a +2 ability of Scry 1, and a -2 ability of whenever you cast your next instant or sorcery this turn, copy it, and you can choose new targets for the copy. So Rahl can be played straight up as a high loyalty scry/victory condition sort of thing that has a little bit of help at making sure people don't tick their planeswalkers up. And then you also can generate a little bit of card advantage from him and a mana advantage at that, from using his -2. It's a pretty powerful card. But the thing that everybody's talking about is how much you can combine Rahl with experiment. If you have expansion explosion, you can use the copy part. So let me walk you through it.
You can just 10 them, right? Like,
well,
10?
No. It's a little spicier than that. Let's say that I just play Rahl, tick him up, so because he has 6 loyalty, you can live, right? On my next turn, I play like an Opt or a Shock or anything cheap. I then have 2 let's say I just have in my hand 2 expansion explosions. I use one of them to copy the Opt. I then, with that one on the stack, play the second one, copying the first one. My copy resolves, and I make a copy of the first one again, and I just keep making copies of expansion until my opponent has taken 20 damage from Rahl's passive. Now, you do need 2 expansion explosions and a cheap spell, but you can also combo off your opponent's spell, because your opponent could play any sorcery, or your opponent could play anything that you could copy with expansion explosion, and then you just play both of your expansion explosions and combo off. But there's also a backup way to do it, which is if you play Rahl Storm Conduit and uses -2, because remember that expansion explosion one, you don't actually need Rahl's abilities other than his passive. But if you use Rahl's -2, then you play Double Cast, which is basically the same as Rahl's -2. You can then play an expansion explosion, and combo off, because what you'll do is the -2 will resolve, then Double Cast will go on the stack. Double Cast will make a second Double Cast because of the Rahl trigger. You can let one of the Double Casts resolve, and with the other one still on the stack, play expansion explosion, have the first one target the Double Cast, and then have the copy from Double Cast of the expansion explosion target the expansion explosion, and then you're comboing off. So basically, if you're playing, you can combine Rahl with 2 expansion explosions or 1 Double Cast and 1 expansion explosion if you use Rahl's -2. And then you have a Splinter Twin situation.
Man.
Anyway.
This is way more going on with Rahl than I originally. I was like, oh, this is a pretty good card. I can maybe win with it, get some advantages, maybe get something a little big if I already have a good spell. But I guess he had to go ruin it.
And if you play Rahl, if you play this whole Rahl combo in your teamer deck, there's some things that make the overlap kind of attractive. Like if you play Double Cast and then follow, or if you use Rahl's -2. If you use Rahl's -2, you know what's a great next instant or sorcery spell to play this turn? Nexus of Fate.
I knew the answer to that one.
Same with Double Cast. So, and plus, it's not like a Nexus of Fate deck has any issue playing 4 expansion explosions anyway. If they've got the incentive, that's kind of an attractive card if you're playing Wilderness Reclamation.
Expansion Explosion?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's tons of people who just play Expansion Explosion and Niv Mizzet and don't even go the Time Walk route these days.
Right. And that's the other way, actually, you can play Rattles Outburst, though, coming full circle, is that if you put Rattles Outburst in a Niv Mizzet deck, or just a Rahl Storm Conduit deck for that matter, but you can just play straight Izzet, and Rattles Outburst is just it's just a solid way to contain threats, and it's important that Rattles Outburst hits planeswalkers as well as creatures.
I think Rattles Outburst is a pretty good card. It's like like you said, it's very Prophetic Boltish, but very importantly, it's a mana cheaper than Prophetic Bolt. I mean, obviously you do 1 less damage, but that's okay. You know, like Fireball for 3 at instant speed is, you know, you wouldn't expect it to be costed at 4, right? You can get that at 1 in some formats. But, you know, adding this selection / card drawing thing that's kind of a nice compression of effects into one card.
Well, I mean, this is so Rattles Outburst is like a lightning strike and a better than opt, right? Like you get your choice of the top 2 instead of 1 and then or the what's behind door number 2, you know?
Yeah,
so I think it's solid, but
I'm like really ungrateful. Like I feel like it should be 3 when you put it that way, and I was like happy with it at 4 before.
Well, I mean, opt is you know, this is a stronger effect than opt, but I think
it's not like 2 mana better than opt.
It's not, and I think you're going to be surprised. I think Rattles Outburst is fine. I don't think it's going to be as good as some people are saying. It's fine. It's just, I bet you're going to find out it lines up weird, particularly when there's so many other options. Like, for instance, in the space of 4 cost, kill a guy and draw a card. Dude, Death Sprout. 1 black, green, instant, destroy target creatures, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library.
I think that this is just a great card.
This is a great card.
Like, would you rather have a 2/2 creature or an instant speed rampant growth? Right? Like that, isn't that the tension here?
Well, it also kills their guy at instant speed, which is, I think, really important in a world with planeswalkers worth protecting against things with haste.
Yeah, I think, like, it seems to me, on average, better than Ravenous Chupacabra. Obviously, Ravenous Chupacabra has got, like, some other incentives. For example, you can find one using a Vivian Reed activation, right? You can't find a Death Sprout that way. But, like, the fact that this can scale you straight into 6 is actually pretty awesome, I think. Like, there's a lot of things you might want to do at 6.
Oh, yeah. And, in particular, Death Sprout can hit your own creatures. Like, part of the reason people play Vraska's Contempt in decks like Sultai or Golgari is the added flexibility of it's not a dead card against some Esper deck with the Fairy or whatever, right? But, like, Death Sprout isn't necessarily a dead card either. Obviously, you could just cycle it off one of your guys that they're going to kill, but sometimes you're going to surprise them where you Death Sprout your own little Merfolk Branchwalker or whatever, and then surprise, you can actually play a Liliana 6 a turn ahead of schedule when they didn't realize it was even possible.
And there's also just other random things you might want to do. Like, you might be like, all right, they're a creature poor deck. I would really just rather get a Rampant Growth than have them gain 2 life and exile my creature, right? Like, maybe you don't want your guy to be exiled. Maybe you know, and like you just have nothing else to do with your Death Sprout. You might have 2, or they don't have very many creatures. And you're just like, I'd rather just get a Rampant Growth and steal their mana. Right? That's a thing. That'll happen sometimes.
Yeah. Yep. So I think Death Sprout looks excellent. There's a lot of competition for 4-cost kill spells, and it's going to depend on what kind of threats people put in the format. But you know, it's definitely an attractive option. Some of the threats in this set, though, it's not just the removal, man. Some of the threats in the set, like, what is the deal with Feather the Redeemed? Red, white, 3/4 legendary creature angel. So it's a 3/4 flyer for red, white. And you're like, okay, what kind of a drawback does it have?
What kind of mass action is this thing?
Dude, so a 3/4 flyer, what kind of drawback does it have? Well, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, exile that card instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves, and if you do, return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. And you're like, wait a minute. So if I play a pump spell on one of my guys, instead of the pump spell going to the graveyard, it'll have its effect, and then I'll just get it back. And this works on your turn and your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that, like, pretty intense of an ability to be charged -1 mana for, right? Like, okay, so here's an example. Let's say you're playing Modern, if you just play Aurelias Fury with this card, and Aurelias Fury is conveniently X red white, and it's even angel themed. But if you Aurelias Fury for 2, you can have one of the damage go to your opponent and one of the damage go to one of your creatures, like Feather the Redeemed. And then they just, because they were damaged by Aurelias Fury, they can't cast non-creature spells this turn. So you could just do this every turn.
Whoa. That's I mean, first of all, Aurelias Fury might just be a playable card because you can X-spell somebody's face sometimes, right? And it might be a playable card because you can abeyance them sometimes, right?
Yeah, and sometimes you just one to that. Well, you get a little bit of value. It's not like it's a bad card.
Yeah, it's just not like it just hasn't had its day yet. But the way that you're putting it, so this is XRW instant. So you just like split one, it gets exiled. So you basically have like turbo advance 3/4. Can you do this on their turn?
You have to do it on their turn. If you want them to not play non-creature spells on their turn, which is the best time to do it.
Yeah. Wait, so if you have, I guess 8 mana is a lot to ask, right? But if you had 8 mana, you could just loop this, right?
Well,
at the beginning of the next end step. So
you can loop it, anything you can pay for twice. That's an instant. You can do twice. It's just how much is it even worth using the Aurelias Fury on your own turn?
That's fair. But, I guess it chains really well, though, because Feather costs 3, and then Aurelias Fury for 2, split 2 ways, costs 4.
Right, like if you're playing Modern, it's not hard to just play a Feather the Redeemed on turn 3, and then if your opponent's playing some sort of a combo deck or a control deck or whatever, a ramp deck, anything, like you can just start Aurelias Furying them every turn. It's Isochron Scepter, and obviously if they have instant speed kill, they could kill Feather. Or if they just play creatures, then they're not locked. But if they're playing some kind of a unfair deck, that's an interesting new angle, right?
Yeah, but Feather's getting in for 3. It's like, it's also a decent clock. It's an outstanding clock for 3, right? Like 3/4 flying with other abilities is pretty cool. And then there's probably just some conventional pump spells or whatever that you can play. Like this card is very specific.
Oh, no, there's even more than that. Right, well, how about this? I'm going to Lightning Helix my Feather. I gain 3. Get it back. On your turn, I Lightning Helix my Feather. Gain 3. Get it back. You can just gain 6 life a turn with Lightning Helix.
Oh, wow. So that's awesome against decks that don't use like damage-based removal, right? Like humans.
Right. Like if you're playing against humans, 6 life a turn and you have a 3/4 flyer. That's kind of a... And it's not like the opportunity cost is high. Lightning Helix is dope.
Oh, yeah, but also Feather is bigger than their ace, right? Like their ace is a 3/3 flyer, right? So Feather can just fight the rider.
Right, and even if we're talking standard, there's some things that Feather does that's pretty exciting. Like, for instance, Chandra's Pyro Helix is being reprinted, which is 1 in a red. You can deal 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. So it's like 1 to my Feather, 1 to you. And you could, or to anything else. And so you can just do that on your turn and your opponent's turn. You just have like a cheap Rod of Ruin thing built in. It's not the sickest thing ever, but you can get a little extra mileage out of your Pyro Helix if it's the thing you were interested in the first place.
Yeah, but it's just totally fine. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, I think a lot of the time, if you start out with cards that are just good enough to play, and then you're adding like some of these functionalities that are like, oh, I also draw an extra card every other turn or something while nugging you for 1, that's the definition of fine, right? Or better than fine.
Right. So, and these are some kind of exciting combos for a 3-cost 3/4 flyer. 3-cost 3/4 flyer that does a damage to every turn has been like a format warping powerhouse at various points in the past.
This card is just very, very, very good. And do you think that it's also like, it's got the right toughness. This lives through happening Clarion, right? So you're like, Clarion, and lifelink this baby up. I don't know. Do you think Feather can bring back the Boros Angels?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think this card is excellent in Boros Angels. And it's going to be a thing worth I don't know how much the legend part's going to matter, but I could imagine it mattering. And it's like Lyra Dawnbringer's already of interest to us anyway.
Yeah, I mean, but even in like just regular cards, right? Boros Angels didn't play this card previously, but now there might be an incentive. You know, the one that's like half a Lightning Helix, half a Giant Growth, right? That one. It's got like a Wax Wane combo.
Yeah. You're not that far off. That card's close.
Yeah, but the card was played. Like people would have like one copy and they're 75 or something. But like that card seems a bunch better if you have Feather.
Yeah, it's a great combo. So, yeah, I think Feather seems like a pretty dope new threat that's well worth building around. It's a little crazy, but, like, it's not even, like, it's not completely impossible to play something like Take Heart. Target creature gets +2/+2 until on a turn. You gain 1 life for each attacking creature you control. It's too bad that you don't get the value in your opponent's turn, but doing that every turn is, like, not trivial.
I mean, they're gonna lose heart.
Right. Yes. So I think the big thing to remember is the big thing to look for is what kind of cards that you'd be interested in playing anyway when you don't have Feather, because you're gonna, when Feather's on the table, you're a happy camper. But what kind of cards that could you play that are good anyway? But if you have Feather, you can at least partially target your own thing without killing it and get some kind of value. Preferably something cheap enough so that you can really do it on you and your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
Because, it's even if you just did something like Sheltering Light still lets you scry twice a turn for cheap. Who knows what all you might be interested in.
I mean, look, what about stuff like just like Defiant Strike? Like Defiant Strike, which is a reprint, right? It's W instant. Target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Draw a card, so it makes Feather a 4/4. But I mean, it's just like an opt machine.
Yeah, or Moment of Triumph. White, target creature gets +2/+2 until on a turn. You gain 2 life. That you actually can do in your opponent's turn. So you're just gaining 4 life a turn.
So yeah, I think Feather is gonna really, really potentially be a challenging thing to play against in the early weeks.
Well, there's also the one I think is probably the most exciting. We haven't even kind of saved the best for last, but in Standard, the thing I think is just so potentially just like revolutionary for some of these Boros Angels decks. Reckless Rage is red instant. Reckless Rage deals 4 damage to target creature you don't control and 2 damage to target creature you control. If you have Reckless Rage, you can just deal 4 and Feather. You can pay 1 mana to deal 4 twice a turn cycle.
Provided they're not killing Feather.
Right. As long as Feather doesn't die, you get Slaughter with the buyback for 1 mana. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think Boros Angels might just be the best creature deck as a result of having Feather. Also, all of these cards that you're naming and all of these, first of all, the cards themselves, Feather itself is really, really good for some of these purposes, but then just some of the cards you're naming, they completely obviate the creature decks that we see already, right? Feather's just better at fighting than almost every creature in kind of the white aggro decks and the red aggro decks, right? It's as big as everything in the blue decks and can block everything except for the Djinn consistently.
Well, and with Reckless Rage now as a great option for taking down the Djinn,
yeah,
that's already less of a problem. But I think Boros is uncommonly well suited to be able to deal 2 damage to one of its own creatures and have that creature not die.
I completely agree. And I think that maybe, I don't know if a splash green is worth it, but Collision Colossus seems like a card I might want to play here. Right? That seems extraordinarily powerful to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you had other reasons you wanted to play Naya, that's a great combo. I wouldn't be surprised if there's just enough incentive to stay just two colors.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
But, that just seems like such an incredible combination. But there's other big threats in this set as well. This set, man, definitely pulling no punches. But what do you think of Leyline Prowler? 1 black green for a 2/3. Death Touch, Lifelink, tap for a mana of any color. So a Vampire Nighthawk, but it's got a green in that cost instead of a 2nd black. And then instead of flying, it has Birds of Paradise ability.
So it's actually super weird to me. Not only are you bringing up all the exact cards I wanted to talk about, you're bringing them up in the exact order I wanted to talk about them, which is like, we are very simpatico tonight. Yeah, so This card is like, I was just like, well, this card is weird. It was just like exactly what you were saying. It's Vampire Nighthawk, which I'm like the biggest Nighthawk fan there ever was. I do think that it loses a little bit in not having flying, but it's still going to do a great job at beating the bejesus out of aggro decks. And I think that the add 1 mana of any color is going to come up interestingly. I don't see it yet, right? But I don't know. Also,
well, isn't the add 1
into a 5? That's kind of cool.
I mean, if you're going to, I could imagine a deck wanting to play with Vivian Reed and Hydroid Crassus.
Yeah, and this is just, I mean, obviously Leyline Prowler gets you directly to Vivian Reed 1 turn early, and it's just an extra mana for Crassus if you're gonna go that direction. The thing that's super cool about this card is it's got exactly the right stats for combating a lot of the mid-range guys that are on the ground, like the average Merfolk Branchwalker, stuff like that.
I really like this card, but man, ready for me to rain on your parade? I think this guy was designed to look attractive and then fall to cards like Lightning Strike and Rahls Outburst and so on.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you're getting your Leyline Prowler Rahls Outbursted, it's not the worst thing, right? Like, your Prowler's cheaper than the Outburst, and the Outburst was going to get an advantage anyway, right? Like, I mean, that card, you can't avoid that card getting up there.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, you can. I think Rahls Outburst you can by just playing with things that have enough toughness, right? Or something that draws a card, right? Like Rahls Outburst isn't exactly doing it against Jadelight Ranger, right? Nor is it doing it against Crackling Drake. But like Leyline Prowler
is not good against Crackling Drake at all.
Or Feather the Redeemed for what
What if I Rahls Outburst my own Feather the Redeemed, though?
Dude, that's an engine.
I'm into that.
Yeah, that's a legit engine. So what do you think of the new Gideon? Gideon Blackblade. 1 white. It's like a 4/4 for 3, so it's another 3-cost version of Gideon. And as long as it's your turn, Gideon is a 4/4 human soldier that's indestructible and still a planeswalker. And then and prevent all damage that would be dealt to Gideon Blackblade during your turn. So already we're just talking about a 4/4 that's like Gideon of the Trials, right? And then here the +1 ability is up to 1 other target creature you control gains your choice of Vigilance, Lifelink, or Indestructible until end of turn. And the -6 is exile target non-land permanent. So the ultimate, one of the least game-winning ultimates we've ever seen. But fine, right? Like you have a 4/4 for 3. And remember, you can use this +1 ability that gives Vigilance, Lifelink, or Indestructible. You can use this and attack. You get to do both.
Yeah, so you basically just get the standard Gideon ability on this guy as a static ability, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think like obviously the +1 not being able to apply to Gideon himself is. I mean, I think like at the on one hand you're like, oh, that's a little disappointing. On the other hand, it's just like what were you thinking? Like they're not really gonna give that to you. Can you imagine?
Well, also though, this ultimate's actually pretty nice, right? Like it doesn't win the game or anything, but like you just drop Gideon and he immediately goes to 5. On your next turn, you're ticking up to 6, getting in there for 4, and possibly giving a little something to one of your buddies. But like, if you're hitting every turn, if you just do this for a couple turns, the option to have your 3-cost 4/4 be a seal of Desert Twister on the table is like very attractive.
Oh yeah, it's very strong. I mean, I think that like the fact that you could just drop Gideon having already played a creature on turn 1 or turn 2, and then you just immediately give it lifelink or vigilance. Vigilance is actually great because you can defend Gideon maybe while having a guy on offense, and gaining loyalty at the same time. That's all pretty good. And then, like you said, Seal of Desert Twister, you can trade up. I mean, Gideon can get value, get damage in for a couple of turns, and then he can zinger your Parhelion the second.
Well, before even Parhelion the second, Gideon's Triumph, man. Gideon's Triumph is quite the extra incentive to play a cheap Gideon.
All these triumphs, Patrick. Oh my gosh. They're the opposite of defeats, right? Like,
yeah. So Gideon's Triumph is 1 and a white instant. Target opponent sacrifices a creature that attacked or blocked this turn. If you control a Gideon Planeswalker, that player sacrifices 2 of those creatures instead. So to begin with, it's an edict, but it's only attacking or blocking. And you're like, oh, okay, people in the past, I mean, people have played stuff like that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But then,
like, it's not that different from like the enchantment that people play in Jeskai right now, right? Like the one that can kill an Azanto Vanguard, gets a tapped guy.
Right. And then the fact that you can, if you have Gideon, you can get 2. Well, how perfect is that with this Gideon? Because you're like, oh, this Gideon can't protect itself. Well, you know what? If you use the +1 ability of Gideon, first of all, if you're plussing Gideon when he comes out, which you're always going to, he just has 5 loyalty, which means most of the time it's going to take 2 creatures for your opponent to kill Gideon. So when they attack with 2 creatures, Gideon's Triumph.
Yep.
And you get them both. Or if you're attacking with Gideon, you use Gideon's +1, and it implies that Gideon is attacking and another creature's attacking. So it implies that your opponent's already going to be blocking with at least 2 creatures if they want to try to stop your attack,
Sure. Yeah, I think this card is very, very solid.
But
you want to talk about the other
Parhelion. Sure, it's up to you.
Yeah, let's talk about the other triumphs first. So Liliana's Triumph has also been spoiled. That's also an instant for 1 and a B instead of 1 and a W. And it's each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you control a Liliana Planeswalker, each opponent also discards a card. So this card is basically a Diabolic Edict, but better because
which already sees play in Vintage and Legacy.
Yep. So, but it's better because it's in group games. You get everybody, not just one opponent. But then it's similar. Like
No. It's actually more important than that. So in Legacy and Vintage, people really do play things like Leyline of Sanctity, right? Or anything that gives them hexproof at all, like the white 2-drop.
Oh, that's super important. You're right.
This kills the white 2-drop instead of literally being uncastable. Yeah. It's not just a group game. It's a big deal against hexproof.
And, even in formats like Legacy, people play quite a few Liliana Planeswalkers in Legacy. So they might pair these 2 cards together. People are playing, Liliana of the Veil and, Liliana of the Last Hope. Those are pretty commonly played in those formats. You get them for an extra card, which I think that's pretty awesome, right? I don't know what you'd ever want more than this. Like, this is just a perfect little black removal spell for 2 at instant, don't you think?
It's a great card for high-powered formats.
Chandra's Triumph has also just been spoiled. Have you seen this one?
Yeah, 1 in a red. Deal 3 to a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. And Chandra's Triumph deals 5 damage to that permanent instead if you control a Chandra planeswalker.
It's like a little less exciting, but it has a nice ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, it's like... So it's in a braid, but instead of hitting artifacts, can do 3 to a planeswalker. But then you're like, we already have that. It's called Lightning Strike. Well, first of all, a lot of people already play 4 Lightning Strikes. But second of all, I think the only reason to even really be like tempted by Chandra's Triumph is if you're specifically playing Chandra and there's a high enough value big hit where you can like, you know, you really just need to be able to kill the Skargan Hellkite. Overall, I think this one's lukewarm.
Yeah, it's clearly less exciting than the other two Triumphs we've seen. I think, like, Lilianas Triumph is just, like, a perfect little card for 2. Gideon's Triumph, I think, like, the first time you get somebody for 2 with the Gideon's Triumph, you're going to be very happy, and they're going to have to respect you a little bit more, at least in that match. I think Chandra's Triumph, like, you know, it's a removal card for 2. Sometimes it's an efficient removal card. But, you know, we have pieces of those cards, like you said before, in other packages, and people play 4 of them, and sometimes they don't.
Right. But, dude, what about Parhelion 2?
Like, this card is very, very powerful, but, I mean, are people really going to play it? It costs 8.
So this is 6 white, legendary artifact vehicle, 5/5 flying first strike vigilance. Whenever Parhelion 2 attacks, create 2 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance that are attacking, and it takes a crew of 4, which is not a big crew.
No, but it is a huge casting cost.
Right. I mean, are you not into Parhelion 2?
I feel like this is probably supposed to be one of the defining cards of the set because its art appears to be in other cards, but I don't know. How do you get out an 8 plausibly?
I mean, it's a 13. Like, you're getting 13 points of stats on your first attack and 21 on the next, right? And you have really multiple defenders.
Yeah, and they've got vigilance. Like, it's a very, very strong card. But I mean, just to paraphrase Patrick Chapin, what did you think you were supposed to get for 15 mana? You know,
for 15. Why are you spending 15 mana though? It's only 8.
You said that when Emrakul did.
Emrakul. Sure.
You're like, yes, it's a good card. What did you think you were going to get for 15 mana? You know, so 8 is obviously, it's on the high side of approachable for standard, but on the very high side. You know, are people playing a lot of 8s? The 8s that they're playing can typically also be played for 6 or for 4, you know?
Yeah, I mean, as a curve topper, though, like, if you have some way to tutor this up, having 1 copy of this is, like, very high impact, right?
I mean, if it's in play, this thing is insane. It's really, really powerful. Like you said, 13 power on the first swing with all of that power being vigilance is... I mean, you can crew on D, right? Your guy didn't tap. Well, yeah, and the 2 angels are both blockers too, you know? Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like, but what do you think? I mean, it's clearly very, very expensive. I think that this is prohibitively expensive unless there's something going on in this format that I haven't seen the enabler yet.
Okay. And we don't think that there's going to be some sick way to cheat this?
Cheat, maybe not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the format is just slow, right? Like, if the format is slow enough, you can play an 8. It's not typical. I don't know a lot of standard formats where people are just, I'm going to play 8 straight lands, and I'm going to tap out for 5/5 that can't immediately do anything. But then, come turn 10 or so, I've really got you.
Yeah, it might be a little slow, particularly given how much Teferi only costs 5 and so on. So speaking of 5-drops, though, one of the most fun, and I would anticipate popular to cosplay cards in this set, Massacre Girl, 3 black for a 4/4 legendary creature human assassin. This 4/4 menace, and when Massacre Girl enters the battlefield, each other creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. And whenever a creature dies this turn, each creature other than Massacre Girl gets -1/-1 until end of turn.
So this card has like a crazy high ceiling and like an kind of average performance, right?
Really?
Well, you need to have there needs to be some 1/1s in play to get the ball rolling. Once that happens, then the ball is rolling, though.
Well, I'm guessing you're going to usually be playing Massacre Girl in a deck that has some ones, right?
Just so that you can catalyze her yourself.
You got to get the party started. You can't count on your opponent just having ones. Massacre Girl knows how to party, and she knows how to pick her friends. And some of her friends are the first to go when she parties.
Remind me never to party with Massacre Girl.
Her name is Massacre Girl. What are you expecting?
All right, so Massacre Girl chilling with some 1/1s and some 0/1s, but once that's the thing, Massacre. I mean, yes, obviously, if you've got like even just 1 or 2 1/1s in play, Massacre Girl kills everything in sight,
except herself, right?
Yeah.
She just sets off the chain reaction and you go. And that's pretty exciting I mean, particularly if you have death triggers, right? Like those are the ideal 1 toughness things to start the party with.
Oh, so you're saying if you can get up there, like Massacre Girl might be like partying with Judith, right? Judith has got a lot of underlings with 1 toughness that have got some death triggers.
So I think, I mean, the competition is steep for 5 drops.
Yeah.
But, like, if you're specifically in the market to go after tokens, too, you could do a lot worse than a 4/4 menace that comes down and just kills all the tokens, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing about Massacre Girl is, I mean, if you're like, just imagine for a second you're gonna initiate the massacre, right? If her text is 5 mana, 4/4 Wrath, keep your 4/4 menace. Like that's a pretty good investment of 5 mana, I think.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like 5 mana, kill everything else and keep a 1/1 would be incredible.
Yeah, but she's a 4/4. So I think that you're right. I guess you just got to play her in the right context. But I guess even if Massacre Girl were generally a pretty lonely creature, you could play her with like planeswalkers and token producers that just whatever you needed to get the party started, you know?
Right.
That's the thing. Like,
I think it's usually only going to take 1 or 2, 1 or 2 drinks, and then it's like, oh no, mommy's been drinking and she's angry.
Like you could just have like Tybalt, like Tybalt and Massacre Girl could be chilling. Tybalt's like, I've got some dead underlings for you. And she'd be like, give me some fire to suck down. There's going to be some blood here. So, yeah, I guess it's silly to say out loud, but I wasn't really I was thinking about Massacre Girl like coming down to try to get there, guys. I didn't really think about that you could create a context for Massacre Girl to make her all you need, like you said, is 1 or 2 1 toughness creatures, and then everybody's dead after that. So
it's kind of, I mean, it's not really a Planeswalker's victory or whatever, but Jaya's Greeting is like an interesting card to see alongside Chandra's Triumph. This is 1 in a red, instant, deal 3 damage to target creature, scry 1.
How is that Jaya's Greeting? I don't want to be friends with Jaya. Like, what is this?
Hello?
Like, this card, I'm like, what is up with Jaya?
Dude, what is up with every
mean
card?
Old woman.
Every card deals 3 damage.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, this card is, I don't know, it's fine. I don't know if I would play it in very many constructed formats. It's way worse than Lightning Strike, right? I mean, if you just need more Lightning Strikes.
Dude, if you just hit a creature, then you also get a scry 1.
Yeah. Ding! That's just not worth the loss of flexibility, though, is it?
Not usually. What about Neheb, Dread Horde Champion, 2 red for a 5/4 trample? This dude's got a type line. Legendary creature, zombie, minotaur, warrior. And so this 5/4 trampler for 4 has whenever Neheb, Dread Horde Champion deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you may discard any number of cards. Go on. If you do, draw that many cards and add that much red mana. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end.
This card seems pretty powerful to me. First of all,
like a 5/4 trample that you get to loot away your whole hand if you want, as much as you want.
And you get paid for it?
And then you get Black Lotus.
Yes, this is solid.
Is this a modern playable card?
Modern playable? I don't know. I think a red-green deck would insanely love this card, though, like in Standard.
Yeah, I mean, a 5/4 trample is a pretty big body. And then if you hit them, the amount of selection of dump your mana creatures or a shock you don't need in the wrong matchup, whatever, you just get such selection. But then you're also just dropping such big amounts of mana on the next turn.
Yeah, the thing about Neheb is, because Neheb is a warrior, right, like, it's already synergistic with, like, Goblin Chain Whirler and, you know, Growth Chamber Guardian. Like, you know, Team Warrior is already... It's like, Neheb, we got a spot on the bench for you already, my man. And he's just like, I am so helpful on the team. I am going to cast the next Chain Whirler for you. Right? Like, he's there. I think he's...
Sure.
I think he's just... He's got his Gruul jersey. He's about to pull it on. He's joining the squad.
So you don't think you could... You don't think you're like in Modern, you're like, oh... I loot away my entire hand, and I have a lot of graveyard synergies. Or in some way, having 8 mana wins me the game. It's probably pretty hard to attack with this 5/4, though.
Yeah, I mean, like, in Modern, getting a 5/4 out... Like, I don't know how long it takes you to get the 5/4 out to begin with, right? Like, but if it's like 4 turns, no. They're going to kill it before it ever attacks, right? But if you're like, all right, I have a cheaty way to get my 5/4 out. Well, you're already cheating, you know? Like, do you need the rest of his cheats? That's the thing. Like, there are other things that you could do that are cheat-tacular, you know, like making a bunch of goblins or, you know, casting a Gifts Ungiven or, you know, something like that to load up your graveyard or, you know, find a good use for RR2. So that's my thoughts on him in Modern or like any format where you have to plausibly attack with him. You know, I don't know about that.
As far as Modern possibilities, does Neoform do anything for you? The green-blue sorcery as an additional cost to cast this spell. Sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1+ the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost, and put that card onto the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter, then shuffle your library.
This is a cool card, right? Like, this is just kind of an upgrade to some cards we've seen before. So, just for the Simic, for a green and a blue, I feel like this is costed pretty aggressively, and then plus you get the +1/+1. You know, you can... I don't know.
Notably, you have to get exactly 1 greater.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, it's from some perspective, it's a creature enchantment. From another perspective, you could be getting a creature that like might have some drawback or something in order to play it, or something in another color. I don't know. I think like this card is probably gonna have an exciting career. I'm not sure that it's in Modern.
You don't think it's in Modern?
I'm not sure. Yeah, like, are there cool death trigger things that we can do, or are there? You know, I think that you really want to be in a situation where you're getting something that is different from the thing that you're killing and super desirable. I don't know. Maybe you can get like what's that druid that untaps a bunch? You can even take advantage of the +1/+1 counter. Maybe. I don't know.
Sure.
It almost seems like a waste of a Neoform to me, though.
What about Neoform my Eternal Witness into, or I mean, really anything, but what about, you know, like, God, what's a better way to put it? Like, if you're just playing one of those Court of Calling toolbox decks or some kind of a combo deck where you just want to, I mean, is there anything there? Because this is a really fast, or in order to really take advantage of the +1/+1 counter, it's kind of implying that you're doing something. You're kind of actually fighting.
I mean, one of the things I was thinking is like you could just chain up like Snapcaster Mage into Eternal Witness into, I'm going to say Solemn Simulacrum, but you know what I mean. You know, like you just have like some value guys up the chain. But I don't know if is that like a plausible deck to play in Modern? Like, I mean, it will certainly murder a lot of the decks that people play, but I don't know if it's the kind that's realistically going to win a tournament unless you've got like a bunch of guys along the chain that are there to, you know, all right, here's my hexproof making guy, or here's my red hating guy, you know, whatever you got to do on the way.
Well, so one of the attractive things you can do is if you just play any 1-drop, turn 2, you can use Neoform on your 1-drop, sack the 1-drop, and go get a flip. Because you've played him from your deck, you'll draw 2 cards, and then you'll just have a 2/2.
Oh.
And if your opponent targets him with anything, he'll shuffle back into your deck, and you could potentially Neoform something into a flip later.
So, yeah, I don't hate that. That's pretty cool. And he pays you back immediately.
Yeah, I get a couple cards already. Yeah.
And you can just turn him into an Eternal Witness anyway. Go get back the Neoform. Right? Like, you can chain up that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we get Birthing Pod back.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. Does role reversal do anything for you? The blue-red sorcery exchange control of 2 target permanents that share a permanent type.
No.
You don't think so? It's just too hard to compare. Like, we just have better options.
Just doesn't do anything for me. Like, I saw it, I was just like, move on to the next. I just not enthused by this card.
Did you ever play Political Trickery?
I did do that.
Isn't this like pretty? I mean, the worlds are different. You don't fill in glaciers, and it's not defined by outposts. But like, this is like a nice upgrade on Political Trickery, right?
Yeah, but like the main point of Political Trickery was that you were targeting your own thawing glaciers, and it was defined by outpost. And I learned about Political Trickery from the great Eric Lauer and the great Andrew Cuneo.
I guess
took my Kaldor Outpost and won the PTQ with it.
I guess I just mean that we're going to have to keep an eye open, because I could imagine sometime in the next year they print some kind of an Undiscovered Paradise.
So I lied a little bit. Like, I think you can roll reversal and say, like, let's say you have Teferi Time Raveler, just for sake of argument, right? And you're like, all right, I'm gonna do some goobery thing where I can play my next sorcery at instant speed because I have Teferi Time Raveler, right? And then I boomerang my own Planeswalker, probably not with the same Teferi Time Raveler because that would be very awkward. But just for sake of argument, I can play Roll Reversal at instant speed, and then I'm boomeranging my own Planeswalker, and then I respond by Roll Reversaling my Planeswalker that has Boomerang on the stack with their Planeswalker. Like, I did think about that. That seemed kind of cool, like, especially because Teferi Time Raveler himself has that kind of kicked into the royal ability. So I'm going to get a card out of it. I'm going to get their cool thing, and they're not going to get to keep my Planeswalker all at the same time. So, yes, I did put some thought into it. And that was the coolest thing I could come up with. And yet I was just like, this seems like a lot of work. And it only works if they have a Planeswalker. And I don't even know if that was the optimal use of all of my cool abilities.
Here's a card that actually is cool, though. The latest incarnation of Maliva, still not even a legend. It's just, there's like the 10th District Recruit and then Veteran. Well, now we've got 10th District Legionnaire. Red-white for a 2/2 haste. And whenever you cast a spell that targets 10th District Legionnaire, put a +1/+1 counter on 10th District Legionnaire, then scry 1. So, if you're playing the Feather deck that we spoke of earlier, well, shoot, this is a 2/2 haste for 2, already kind of interesting. But like when you play any of those pump spells, you get extra value. And this is such a perfect card to do 2 damage to while you're dealing 4 damage to an opponent's card.
Because you're getting +1/+1, so it's just going to be 3 toughness to begin with.
Right. And then you just get to turn the drawback of the deal 2 damage into an upside of now you've got a hasty Watchwolf.
Yeah. I think this card is, 2/2 haste it's a non-legendary 2/2 haste. That seems all right. And the upside abilities are, you can certainly get them if you want to try.
So that one doesn't do anything for you?
I think it might be awesome, but it wasn't on my short list of cards to play with Feather.
Oh man, that one I'm excited about that one because I think it's going to be all about the deal 4, deal 2.
So I was thinking to start with Adanto Vanguard and Tocatli Honor Guard at the 2. You think those guys are too out of their time?
Yep. But we'll see. We got to see what the rest of the big threats in the format are. The rest of the defining characteristics of the format. So,
what do you think about all these planeswalkers that just have an ability that you would just pay more mana than that to get that ability?
Like what?
A ton of them have a static ability where you're just oh, that seems pretty reasonably costed. If it were
what? What's a specific one?
Enchantment. Gaining Hexproof, for example.
So, Kea, Bane of the Dead, 3 Orzhov, 7 loyalty. Your opponents and permanents your opponents control with Hexproof can be the oh no, that's getting rid of your opponent's
That's getting rid of your opponent's Hexproof.
Which one are you speaking of?
Isn't there one that's 3 mana and then you gain Hexproof in white?
Oh, sure.
It is...
Yeah, but there's Teo the Shield Mage is 2 and a white for 5 loyalty. You have Hexproof. And then you can pay -2 to create a 0/3 white wall.
Yeah. You're not into him?
It could be fine, I guess. If you were a person who if you're playing, part of the problem is that in say Modern, for instance, Leyline of Sanctity is such a high bar, right?
Yeah.
And then in Standard, you might be interested in this, but everybody plays ways to kill planeswalkers.
But I was just thinking yes, I agree Leyline of Sanctity is super high bar because it can be free sometimes. But when it's not free, there are decks where you just play a second turn Teo. They're unlikely to be able to kill you now. Right? Because they can't kill a planeswalker easily.
You're talking about in Modern?
Yeah, in Modern.
But they could kill an enchantment easily?
No, not that they can kill an enchantment easily. It just costs 3.
Instead of 0, like Leyline of Sanctity?
Yeah, but it doesn't always cost 0. That's the thing. If it's not in your opening hand. What about the Wanderer? I think this is a really powerful ability.
Well, one thing I wanted to note on Teo, by the way, before we go past, is that Arcadius, the strategist. Yeah?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually awesome.
Yep.
Right? He's spitting out Watchwolves now.
And drawing cards.
But what about the Wanderer is another example of a card I thought that might have one of these static abilities that was just kind of reasonably costed. So the Wanderer is 3 and a W for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. Has the ability -2, so theoretically you can do this twice while still leaving the Wanderer's I was going to say body, but it's kind of planeswalker card. Exile target creature with power 4 or greater. That's not a bad ability for somebody who only has a minus. But it's prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to you and other permanents you control. This is a pretty hose-tacular hoser against some strategies.
Right? I don't know, man. I don't know. This card has always been a very mediocre sideboard card for 2.
Yeah?
Marker of Asylum. So I'm not super optimistic about the Wanderer.
All right.
It could be okay, but it's whatever. It's a little expensive. And there's just so many amazing 4s.
I think Tybalt is a little expensive, but I still might want that ability. All right? 2 and an R, your opponents can't gain life. There's a lot of people who are in trouble if you have this thing in play. People who are, require, anybody who's kind of liching you, anybody who's, a lot of these blue-white decks or Esper decks are just covered in cards that say gain life. They're absorbing, They're craving.
It's just going to be so easy for them to deal 3 damage to Tybalt.
Oh, yeah, man, they can just Restless Contempt it also, right? Like, that's one of the ways that they gain life.
Or whatever. They could just Rattles Outburst it and get value. Yeah, I guess this guy, I mean, maybe. I know people are excited about your opponents can't gain life. I'm not overly excited about this one. But we'll see. Who knows? It could be okay.
What about just like you can play creatures as though they had flash? You like that one?
I don't know.
Yeah, none of these stat abilities on Planeswalkers are exciting you.
No, I didn't say that. I just all these that are just straight minus ones.
All right,
we'll see. I don't know. I'm a lot more excited about the rares, but I'm sure some of these will be all right. I just haven't had time to process them all yet.
All right, let me try this one then.
Okay.
As long as it's your turn, creatures and planeswalkers you control have lifelink. How about that one?
The flash one's not one of the minus only. They all have statics in this set. They're like passives, but which one are you talking now?
Oh, as the new Sorin. I think that card's pretty good.
Oh yeah.
I think this one is I think this I think the upcoming format that is going to include War of the Spark is going to be super hostile to permission and super hostile to red aggro. Like, this card is crazy to me how good it is. I mean, if you're playing against red aggro.
Like, the idea that you could just drop this and all your creatures have lifelink is like, what? And then when you +2,
yeah,
and it's up to 6, and then you're doing 1 to a player or planeswalker, but you're just
gained a life just to rub it in their face.
And then return a creature with cost X from your graveyard. That's a nice option. Get a little extra threat going. Get somebody back so that you can give them lifelink. Yeah, this card seems phenomenal.
This card is so good. Like, I cannot wait to play with the new Sorin. Like, can you imagine him with, like, hasted creatures and big creatures and fast creatures and going wide? Any of those things sounds great to me.
I just want to get back at. I just want to drop it as like sort of an Ajani, and just get back a 2-drop from my graveyard, but then randomly gain 8 life for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, but this is like, it just turns on like, you know, whatever that 3 casting cost angel that like when you gain a certain amount of life, you just make Sarah's, right? You just cheat. Right, if you just played that, let's say you played guys like for the first couple of turns of the game, they just play Sorin and swing with everything. Just turns it on.
Mm-hmm. It's also really interesting just how much life you could gain from like pairing this with any kind of planeswalker that actually deals damage. You know, like any kind of Chandra or whatever.
Oh yeah, Chandra. That's a big game. Like gain 7 Wheel of Fortune. That's really good.
Taste it.
The other thing that I was thinking about that I think is, I'm not sure if controversial is the right word, but I think it will test the limits of the mechanic, is how Proliferate is in this set. And I'm not sure if it's like, some of these Proliferate cards seem really powerful to me, and some of them I'm just like, I don't know if they're going to be good or if they're too good or if they're not good enough to play, because we don't have a huge amount of data as to what's good Proliferate. But like, what do you think about like Evolution Sage? This card seems really strong to me if you're in the market for Proliferation.
So this is the 2 and a green. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, Proliferate, and it's a 3/2 elf druid, notably.
Yeah. So like if you played like an Evolving Wilds or a fetch land, you get like 2 quick proliferations out of that. I mean, isn't Proliferate like similarly powerful to a card? Like each Proliferate? Potentially, maybe sometimes it's really powerful, right? Like if you have multiple planeswalkers or something like that, or you've been cashing in all your stuff with your 10th district guy, you know, like tons of stuff can be triggered off of this. Obviously, you have to have this card in a context where there are counters to be counted, but I mean, they're kind of pushing these kinds of cards.
Well, when a land enters the battlefield under your control, Proliferate, if you were playing that with Jace, Cunning Castaway, you could go turn 3 Evolution Sage, turn 4, you just drop Jace and immediately ultimate him, right? If you have an Evolving Wild. Because, like, he starts at 3, you play Evolving Wild, he goes up to 4, you crack the Evolving Wild, he goes to 5, and then you just use his ultimate. And now you just have 2 Jaces. Alternatively, you could just be playing a deck that has lots of +1/+1 counters because of Wild Growth Walker and Jade Light Ranger and Merfolk Branch Walker and Hydroid Crassus. Plus, you already have stuff from like Nissa or various Vraskas or whatever. You could just have a lot of +1/+1 counters,
or like the entire adapt mechanic. Right? There's a ton of guys out there that are just have the adapt mechanic and they're doing real good. Right? They're incubating, they're growth chambering.
It's probably a little too slow, but I mean, one does have to wonder: is there some way to use this in Modern with Arcbound Ravager and Hangerback Walker and Walking Ballista? And
it's in the right color. I'll tell you that.
You're right.
I mean,
right. And if you can afford to play fetch lands too, I mean, if you can go Evolution Sage, immediately play a fetch land, crack it, and just +2/+2 your team. I don't know. It's interesting.
What if you had like a first turn Hardened Scales? Second turn,
right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That may be. That seems powerful. But I was also thinking like Karn's Bastion, right? Just like a land that proliferates. Like there's just no cost to playing it.
Well, there is. It's colorless, and you sort of very likely whatever +1/+1 counter synergies you're playing or whatever planeswalk synergies you're playing, you could use more dual lands rather than colorless lands. That said, I think Karn's Bastion is like actually a very efficient place to find Proliferate because Proliferate is so dynamic, right? Sometimes it's worth a lot, and sometimes it's not worth very much. And when it's not worth very much, the floor is so high on the tap. Like Karn's Bastion is effectively a modal card each turn, right? Like it can be a land that's an untapped land, or it can be an expensive Proliferate engine. And so just whenever Proliferate's bad, you just use it as a land. And whenever Proliferate's good, then paying for to Proliferate is like a very powerful option. So I think Karn's Bastion looks exciting.
I agree with you.
It's more exciting to me than Mobilized District.
Mobilized District is an interesting card, right?
Mobilized District is probably better in more places, by the way. I just think Karn's Bastion is going to be more novel of gameplay. It only takes one... Like, it doesn't take very much for Mobilized District to be just like a passable man land, creature land.
Well, the thing about Mobilized District is it's only like reasonably costed. So Mobilized District is it's a rare land, taps for colorless, comes into play untapped, and it has the ability Mobilized District becomes a 3/3 citizen creature with vigilance until end of turn. It's still a land. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature and legendary planeswalker you control. Like, the value of this kind of an effect, right, the kind of the Stalking Stones effect, is, I think, diminished when you have to pay for it over and over again unless you have other good threats, which is, I think, when this land is good. Right? Like, I mean, who cares if I can make a 3/3 citizen if I've got a bunch of legendary planeswalkers?
Right.
That's or sometimes it's probably really good to have a land that can become a 3/3 creature, but it's not exciting if I have to pay, effectively 4 to 5 mana per turn in order to get that instead of only once, like I did with the original.
Yep. I think you got it exactly.
So what's your favorite, most exciting card that we talked about this week?
Since we didn't, I guess we sort of talked about Nika Bolas Dragon God, but if we're gonna not count that one every week from here on out, Feather the Redeemed.
Yeah, I think Feather's really exciting. I also love the new Sorin. Oh. I just want to.
I love the new Sorin, but everybody's into that guy.
Yeah,
Feather, I think people are sleeping on. Which one did you want to get?
I just had just a quick. What do you think about this card? Because I don't know. I think I might just be too crazy about Amass. Remember last week I was just like Amass.
You are too crazy about Amass. That's true.
Like, I think Lazotep plating is like super good, and I feel like, am I crazy? Like this card might not even be good. So
I think you have a leak.
Yeah?
But go ahead.
So yeah, so Last Step Plating is 1 in a blue, instant, amass 1. You and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Right? So I'm just like, I can counter a Banefire and make an army. It counters a Banefire no matter how big. Makes an army. Saves my creature. Doesn't work with Feather, though. Doesn't work with Feather.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it could be okay. You'd have to really value Amass. I just really haven't seen a lot of...
But what if you were a crazy lunatic who super valued Amass?
It sounds pretty damn good. Like it's like, dude, it's so cheap. The fact that you can just amass at instant speed too, so that like you could use it proactively. Your zombie is about to fight somebody, and then you're just like, surprise, it's one bigger.
Yeah.
Or your opponent tries to like play their edict, and they're all fancy because they're like, I know that even if he gained hexproof, Lilianas Triumph doesn't target, and then you're like, surprise, I actually have a 1/1 to sacrifice to it. Yeah.
Ooh, I didn't even think of that one. Last Step Plating is even better than I thought. Thank you for that vote of confidence for Last Step Plating, Patrick.
Yeah, and like your opponent's got Feather, and they're just, playing that deal 4, deal 2 every turn. Well, you can actually fizzle it. It's like Capsize with the buyback. You can fizzle it by giving your guy hexproof.
Can you? No, because doesn't it have multiple targets, so Feather just gets it back anyway?
Well, no, you have to do both. Like, you have to also kill Feather.
Oh, yeah.
But this is a start.
No. Feather, in this specific example that you had, I think Feather destroys me.
Well, and, what you can do is... Yeah, I don't know, man, dude. I'm trying, man. Right. But I think you're a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs on the Amass here.
I'm voting for Feather. I can't wait to bust the Boros cards back out. Boros Angels version 2.0 coming to the top 8 of a standard tournament near you.
Nice.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, so jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis.